guys and gals. Today we're going to be installing one of Holley's analog fuel pressure gauges and the sensor that comes along with it. Now you can pick this up from Summit for about 110 bucks. And it comes with just the sensor, just the brass part you see on the top. This little fitting cost me $7 from Summit. I'm using the fitting because I do not have the fancy little fuel rail that comes off the side of the carburetor, and I've went with 3/8 fuel hose almost all the way down to the fuel pump. This is what comes in the box. It's the pressure gauge. It's got the little mounting part that actually comes off the back. That piece right there is so that you can screw the second set of screws in, and it holds it into one of these bezels, or you can do a 2 1/16 hole in your dash, but I'm not cutting holes in my dash. So anyway, we're going to get to installing this. And one of the first things you're going to want to do after you, of course, remove your negative battery terminal off your battery, you're going to want to take the fuel line loose. Now if you've got, this is a GM product that's had a Edelbrock carburetor put on, so your setup may look different. Once I've disconnected the fuel line, and you can see this is attached to this little adapter here, and on mine I want it to sit about right there so that this little canister is pointed towards the back, out of the way, and I'm going to have it routed to where the fuel filter just goes directly into this right here. I've already pre-measured and pre-formed the hose. Now to do that, all I did was get it really warm with a heat gun, and then I formed it into place. I used a clamp and 2 books and a ratchet strap, but that's just what I had on me to get everything bent and set into place. And then I stuck it in the freezer for about 4 hours, and when I pulled it out, it looked like this. I don't know if that's going to work with all hoses, but most of the older hoses that came factory on these trucks, if they're still pliable at all, you can pull them out, get them really soft, bend them into place, and then once you cool them back down rapidly, for some reason they seem to harden into place like this. It's worked for me many a times. So anyway, what I'm going to be doing, I've got so much stuff here already that I can work with. I'm just going to cut a little piece of this hose and use it between as a coupler, so to speak. And what we're going to do is, basically set it on there like this. Right now I'm just trying to get my hose length right because I want it tucked up as close as I can to the carburetor. Now the reason I'm doing this on this truck is because I've been having issues where it's been bogging down under heavy acceleration, and sometimes it catches back up to itself and sometimes it doesn't. With a new carburetor and a new fuel pump, I'm assuming that there is a clog in the fuel system somewhere, or a broken hose along the way that's letting air into the line. I don't know that for sure. And that's the reason I'm putting this on before I start digging completely into the fuel system. I want to be able to see what my fuel pressure is when I'm having the issue. And if I see a fuel pressure drop, then I know, alright, I've got a new carburetor, I've got a new fuel pump. It's time to disconnect all the lines, drop the tank down, and put a new sending unit in it, possibly just replace the little sock. Gotta go grab some more parts. Alright, I'm back. Had to go get some more hose clamps. Speaking of hose clamps, don't you hate going up to the auto parts store and paying a bunch of money for something that you know they're getting dirt cheap? Me too. So I'm starting to look for the distributors that will actually sell in moderately small quantities. For example, I found a distributor and got a lot, I think it was 150 pieces. It was these little stainless steel clamps for about the price of going to a retail store and buying a box like this. Did the same thing on all the bolts that are going to be going back in the engine. They're all stainless steel. And I managed to get, for the price of intake bolts, I got every bolt for the engine straight from the distributor. But that's not what we're here to do. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the fuel filter. Again, if you've got like a Quadrajet and it's still stock, your fuel filter is going to be up here in the front of the carburetor, and you're going to have to do other kind of modifications just to get to where you can hook up a 3/8 fuel line. And there's a lot of videos out there, Tyler's Forgotten Car Rescue, My Vintage Iron. There's some guys out there that really go into depth about the Quadrajets and how to make them work and how to modify them. What I learned from them was just go ahead and replace it. But there's still a lot of people that really love them. I guess they do get good gas mileage. That is one plus of the Quadrajet, those tiny primaries. For an 850 CFM carburetor, it does get decent gas mileage. And yes, they're 850 CFM, 200 more than this. Alright, so that's got our fuel line hooked up. It's just that easy to do that part of the procedure. As you can see, it's not kinked anywhere. I'll put that bend in there beforehand so everything will still flow well. It's got some give. You don't want it to be tied up against anything that's going to move. This is free and looking good. Next is getting the wiring done. Now on the actual gauge itself, you'll see it's orientated to up and down. When you turn it around here, the light is going to be at the top. This side actually goes to the gauge. Now all you got to do is put one wire. You're going to have to provide your own wires. I didn't realize that when I ordered it, but it's not a big deal. And your own clamps and brackets and anything else you want to use to make it pretty. You got to provide all of the hardware. This side goes to the gauge, and it's marked with an S. This side goes to power, and you would hook that to ignition power so that it only comes on when you turn it on. And this goes to ground, and it's labeled ground, so it'll be pretty easy for you. Now right here is this little blade connector. It's a male. You would want to hook a female blade connector up to that, and you've got two options. If you want the light to be on all the time, just hook it over to your power. And if you only want it to come on when the lights are on, find the illumination wire somewhere in your car or in the fuse box and hook it to that. Be sure you do not touch this to power ever. Even for a split second, it will ruin the gauge. Or not the gauge, but the actual sending unit. It's just a simple pressure unit, the same thing you'd find on the back of an engine for oil pressure. You know, you could probably get this gauge and this sending unit cheaper if you sourced them and just bought them by themselves, but I went ahead and ordered it through Holley because it says Holley on it. So once you've determined which wires need to go where, you need to then start running your wires. I guess it'd probably be a good idea to figure out where you want it in your vehicle. That way you know how long your wires need to be. Like I said, I bought one of these gauge pods, and I'm gonna put it in there, and it's gonna be up on the dash of the vehicle. And we'll show you that here in a second. Alright, so in my truck, it's a square body Chevy. I'm gonna put the gauge right there because it's out of the way. It's easy to see. I can have it turned towards me a little bit. And this dash up under here is nasty anyway. It's got this carpet covering it. It's just a carpet cover. So I can route my wires under it and have them come in under the gauge pod and have a fairly clean install, not have any wires showing. And I'm not concerned with screwing down directly into the dash itself because, like I said, it's already busted up under there. This doesn't need to, it's not holding any weight, it's just keeping it from moving. I could put Velcro under it or something like that, but I'm just going to put a couple of screws down through the dash, and that's going to keep it from sliding, and that's really all it's going to be doing. So once you're at this point, you're going to want to figure out where your wires need to be ran. For me, I'm going to be running them under here, down behind this panel, and straight to the fuse panel down there, because that's going to be easiest for my application. I won't have to drill through the dash or anything like that. And then once that's done, I will be making one solid hole. Of course, you can't see anything up under there. I will be making a hole under there. There's the fuse panel, so that's where two of the wires are going to be ran, because I do want mine to illuminate when I turn it on, just because I don't want that bulb having to burn all the time during the day. Just make the bulb last longer, that's all. And on these old GM fuse panels, they're pretty well labeled, so you don't really have to look for anything. You've got, you know, labeled ignition, accessory, illumination, all that stuff's labeled. So I'm just going to be using blade connectors and sticking it in beside the fuse that's already existing. I've had pretty good luck with that in the past. And I will be drilling one hole somewhere up in here. I haven't decided yet. I'll have to really stick my head up in there and look. But I've got one of those little grommet things that go between the firewall to keep everything from cutting your wires up. So that'll be good for that. Alright, I think I found the best spot for this to go through at. No obstructions, it's near a bunch of other wiring, and it's right next to the fuse panel. We've only got one wire to go through, so let's get her done. Just that easy. Clean it up a little bit. Now those edges are going to be super sharp. Well, if this gets too frustrating, I just won't be using it. That's what silicone's for. We are going to try to be all fancy and use the little rubber doodad to go through the dash. With one finger though, I'm telling you. It's not that I'm holding the light, it's just that I couldn't get another finger up in there if I wanted to. That is tight working quarters. Oh, well, I got it halfway. You know what, y'all? An alternative to this is run your wire through using some RTV or some silicone. Seal up that hole. Just make sure there's enough on both sides that it globs up a little bit around the hole. and then once it dries it won't pull back through. Alright guys and girls, this is what I've come up with as far as wiring. I went ahead and pre-measured everything and got the links all measured out. Got yellow on the side that's going to the gauge and black on the side that's not going to the gauge, I guess. This is the blade terminal that's going to go in for power. This is going to be grounded to the firewall under the hood, and you'll see all that when we get out there. And this of course is going to hook directly to the actual sending unit. I decided to come inside in the air conditioning to put all this together and get it ready. So that's what we're doing. Hey everybody, sorry my battery died while I was doing that. I wasn't paying any attention. I got a new external microphone on the GoPro now, so it's taking up a lot more battery than it used to. Anyway, so I've got everything wired up and I've got the actual gauge put in this little pod. You can see how that looks once it's in there. It was a booger getting in there just because the wires take up so much space, and the little bracket part that Holley provides for some reason doesn't go all the way on. It has these little clips on the back that I guess are supposed to hold the wires in place, but all they do is get in the way. I ended up having to modify it, and this wire wasn't long enough, so I ended up having to triple the length of that so that I could wrap it around and get it to plug in. But it's all up in there now, and once this is mounted on the dash and these wires are ran under that carpet, that should look pretty good. So we're gonna head outside and start putting this in place. Alright, I've got the wires ran down under this carpet. I don't know if you can see that very well. Just ran down under that carpet. Ran all the way up the front side of this dash, all the way down through here, and then it's popping out down here. I'll get better situated and I'll get all that hooked up. Well, this is not how I wanted this to turn out. So this Holley 26503 electric fuel pressure gauge that we were working on installing earlier doesn't work. I am thinking that it's the actual sending unit because the gauge lit up but never moved. The dial actually never moved. So that was, you know, about a 3-hour install and about another hour to pull everything back out. It's going to be sent back, and I'm going to be going with a Dakota Digital to replace it with. And after reading and doing some research, it turns out that these Holley gauges are actually a Faria, which is marine gauges. They're just rebranded. Holley must have rebranded them, and it's a Stuart Warner 411 AB sending unit, which you can't find anywhere, which kind of makes me mad because I'm assuming now that Holley has some deal worked out with them where you can't find their pressure sending unit to replace it with. You just have to buy the whole kit and caboodle again at $110. I don't know what to say. That's just so frustrating because Holley makes such good products when it comes to electronics, and then you get an electric fuel pressure gauge from them and it's just crap. There were a few other problems I had during installation that I wasn't even going to mention if everything went well, but since it didn't even work right out of the box, I'll go ahead and mention that the bezel that holds the gauge into whatever pod you want to put it in it doesn't actually mate properly with the back of the gauge bezel to pull it into place and hold it there well. You have to actually modify the back part of the bezel to get the wires to go anywhere, really. I had my wires facing down, which was obviously the way it was supposed to be set up, but the plastic part that, like I said, sucks it up against the front of your gauge bezel, or your gauge pod rather, it wouldn't go all the way down once you had the wires in place. You had to cut some of the plastic out of the way so that it would, you know, suck the face up. Which already, you know, you're having to modify something that you just paid $110 for. So I'm going to pay $210 now and go with Dakota Digital, because this Holley 26503 electric fuel pressure gauge is not for me.